Okay, in this video, we are going to discuss and demonstrate the changing of a regulator, a brush set, and other small parts inside of one of the Wolverine Technologies alternators. What we have here are two alternators. The first one is just the rear half of the alternator, which contains the stator, the regulator, and all the other small parts, as well as the rectifier, the brushes. All that is contained in the rear of the alternator. On the right, we have a complete alternator, and we're just going to show you how to remove the rear case from there. It'll make it simpler. First step is removing the alternator from the vehicle. Once the alternator is out and on the bench, you're going to remove these 4 bolts. They're 3/8 inch standard threads. They're around the circumference. There's 4 of them. Our alternators, a note just in case you didn't know, they're a 1-wire alternator. The case is grounded. There is a ground bolt right here, and it's labeled GRD, which is ground. That's where your ground wire goes. The only other bolt you're going to use is the positive or the battery terminal. This is where your wire will bolt or connect that goes to your batteries. On the military trucks, it will go to the large starter post where your main battery cables connect. So to remove this, replace a regulator, brushes, or what have you, you're going to remove these 4 bolts first. I'm not even going to do that in this video. It's very simple. You're going to remove these 4 bolts, and that will release this rear half of the alternator, as well as the stator that I'm touching right now with my finger. These will come off in one piece. Once the rear of the alternator is removed, the rear case, this is what you're going to see. You're going to have the rear case and the stator, and they're going to come off in one piece. When you're removing the alternator, don't pry these apart. Don't pry the stator away from the alternator rear case. Pry the stator and the rear case together as a unit away from the front alternator casting. There are notches in the alternator castings where you can put a screwdriver and put a little pressure to separate it from the front case. You're going to be careful not to damage these windings or remove the varnish off of these windings when you're prying it apart. So you're only going to go in a little ways when you do this. You're just going to go in real shallow and put a little pressure to pry it apart from the front half of the case. So you're going to be prying between here and the front half of the case. This one is loose. Some of these stators, once they're in the case, they stick. I'm going to show you some grooves here. This stator, we'll start here. This stator is held in place or connected at 3 points. 1, 2, 3. Those are 3/8 nuts that hold that in place. You can see the legs of the stator connect to the rectifier in those 3 points. You can also see I've removed the nuts. So this stator will pull off just like that. Very simple. But what you're looking for is, when I'm talking about the stator being stuck in the case, are these points of contact right here. If you'll notice, they are a notch. They're squared off. They have a shoulder, if you look at it. The stator will set down in these notches, and sometimes the fit is a little snug right here. We got some of our powder baking coming off. But sometimes the stator is a little snug right in here, and actually the more snug, the better it is. It helps hold the 2 alternator halves in line with the stator. If they were too sloppy, they wouldn't. So, assuming we've removed this alternator, and this alternator is, this half is off. We've now removed the stator with the 3/8 nuts, and we've set the stator aside. the 3 nuts that come off of these 3 legs on the stators are a special thread, special size. They don't go anywhere else inside this alternator. The only place that these 3 nuts will connect is here, here, and here. There are other positions inside this alternator where you could try to put those nuts. One would be here, the other would be down here. But they will partially thread, but if you continue to tighten them, you will break them off. Also, this nut here and this nut here, since they are so close in thread pitch and size to the nuts that are on these 3 posts, if you were to try to thread that nut or that nut on any of these 3 posts, they will partially go on, and then they'll jam and they will break the studs off of the rectifier, and then you need to buy a new rectifier. I suppose there's a couple ways to fix that. I've done it myself, but it's a pain in the butt and you don't want to go there. Next step is we're looking at changing the regulator. So if you look at this alternator, when you pulled the rear case off of the front half and you remove the stator, you can see the brushes down inside of here. One will pop forward and almost touch the rectifier. One kind of is held back. You can see it's by the tension on the wire. That's one thing to note. To replace a regulator, which is this white plastic piece down here that I'm touching with the ink pen, we're going to have to remove a few items. The first thing we're going to have to remove is this strap. This is the regulator connects to the rectifier by this metal strap. You're going to remove this 7/16 nut. That nut is attached to a stud that comes out the back of the alternator. That is your main charging post. That's where all the power that this alternator makes is going to go into your truck's electronic system, is through that post. When you reinstall this post, you need to make sure it's tight. If you leave it loose, you're going to have problems, so it needs to be tight. You're also going to remove this nut here that I'm touching with my finger. That is also a 3/8 nut. Both of those have to be removed. So remove this nut, remove this stud. When you remove this stud, of course, you'll be able to remove this strap. That's what holds it down. And if you look at the rear, this stud and the insulator will come right out of the back of the case when you remove this large 7/16 nut. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my handy drill here. This is what I like to use. And just remove that stud, loosen it, and spin it off. You don't need to worry about catching the nuts or anything. You can also see that the post came right out of the back of the alternator. As I said before, do not leave that loose. The next thing we're going to do is get a 3/8 nut driver, which I just happen to have one handy right here. And we're going to remove this nut. Now we're going to take off the strap. Easy as can be. You're going to dump the nut out. And like I said before, this nut will start to thread on these posts, and it'll feel like it's going to go. But if you go too far, you're going to snap them off. It has to stay in the position that you removed it from. Next thing is there's a terminal that comes out of the back of the case attached by this nut. We don't really use this terminal. You don't need this terminal, but we leave it there for other purposes, mainly as a jump start terminal for the if you lose the field current. So we're going to remove that nut. That is a 3/8 as well. So we'll get our handy, this is a DeWalt advertisement, handy DeWalt 20 volt screwdriver. Okay, now we've removed that. You can dump that out. And I'm going to show you the way this installs. Once again, you remove the nut and you look at the back, and the stud and the insulator is going to come out of the back of the case. The way this goes is just as you see here. The insulator can be removed. It's got a square post. It locks into the insulator. Let me see if I can do this. It locks into the insulator, and it goes right into the square hole. The insulator, the hole that it goes in, is right there. And it is marked R. There's an R casting by the square hole. This insulator also has a square profile to it. So you'll slide it down into this hole, and you'll move it around till you get it in the place where it goes. And you flip to this side of the case, and you can see it protruding. Okay? When you reassemble this R terminal, there's an insulator that goes on the inside as well. So when you reassemble this, you're going to have this fiber washer. That's an insulator. It's an insulator because it doesn't conduct electricity. Then you're going to see this Z-shaped bracket. It's not really a bracket. It's just a path for electricity to flow into the rectifier. The rectifier being this finned aluminum piece containing 6 diodes. So this will set right on there, like that. That's how that sits. So once that's in place, you're going to hold the back of it with your finger, the stud where it protrudes from the rear with your finger, so it doesn't fall out. And you're going to start your nut on that post, the inside. You're going to tighten it down. Remember, these are tiny nuts and bolts. Do not over torque them. You can do it with just a screwdriver, nut driver by hand. Don't get carried away. You will snap them off. Okay, so we can go ahead and remove this now. I've showed you how to take it out, and I've showed you how to assemble it. So we'll go ahead and dump this out. Next part, we're going to go ahead and start removing other pieces. Now you can see I've removed the bolt from the diode trio. I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to remove this bolt from the regulator, this bolt from the regulator, and this bolt from the brush holder. I'm just going to zip them out with air, or with my little screw gun, another DeWalt advertisement. And once those are out, the regulator, the brush holder, and the brushes will come out in one piece. You can now see that I've removed the brush holder bolt and the 3 bolts that hold the regulator and the diode trio. These are not going to come out separate. You can just grab them once the bolts are removed, and you just give it a little wiggle and pull this whole piece right out. Now this is what you're dealing with. Here you can see the bottom of the case. There's not much left in there. Just the rectifier and the capacitor. But our area of concern is right here. We're after this regulator, this white regulator that I have my hand on. You'll see the shape. We're after that. That's what we want to remove. So I'll go ahead and pull these apart, and we'll start all over. Okay, so here we have our parts pile. Let's call it this. You'll see that there are bushings, which are insulators, still in this group of parts. They're easy to remove. Sometimes they stick. You just grab them and twist them. Twist and pull at the same time, and it pops out. Let's take a look at these insulators. The first thing you're going to notice, they're just plastic. These are clear, and it's just an insulator. And it slides right into this being the diode trio itself. Let's take a look at that. That's a diode trio. It's just a diode, and it has 3 ears for attaching to the stator and the rectifier, and 1 goes to the regulator, this post. So we'll go ahead and set this off to the side. And then you're going to notice the regulator and the brush holder. You'll just pull this apart, slide it off. That's it. Slides right off. You're also going to notice, I'm going to put some attention on this brush holder for a second. You notice how the brushes will spring forward, these brush arms. They're just under spring tension. It's a coil spring with a tail. You'll notice the brushes themselves can be removed from these arms. I'll show you that in a second. When we're reinstalling this brush holder, and let's say this is a new regulator, you need to push these back and hold these brushes back. That will uncover a loop. The loop I'm talking about is right there. You're going to slide that pin all the way through, and it's going to hold the brushes back. They have to be reinstalled in the held back position with this pin. If you don't have a pin, you can use a lot of people use a toothpick, or one of our customers told me he always uses the red straw from a can of carburetor cleaner. I think he said he used CRC brand. I just used the cheap AutoZone stuff. We go through it by the gallon. So now that these are held back, we can go ahead and slide the regulator back in. And it goes like this. You'll notice these two protruding bumps or protrusions. You'll also notice two holes here. You're just going to slip it together just like that. Squeeze it together. And you're going to reinstall everything in the reverse procedure. You're going to take the diode trio, and you have this little insulator. And you're going to slide it in here all the way down. Easy. Very simple. Then you're going to take the whole assembly here, and you're going to drop it down into your case. You're going to line up the three spots. You don't have to do it this way. The diode trio, I pulled it out and put it in unison with the regulator and the brush holder assembly. But you can put the regulator and brush holder assembly in first, and then the diode trio, and that's how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these three bolts and this bolt back here for the regulator and the brush holder. And there you go. Okay, you can see I've reinstalled the bolts, the one for the brush holders, the one for the regulator, and the diode trio. That's all there. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install this battery post and this strap. Remember to use the nuts that came with it. Don't do anything weird and mix up the nuts. Be very careful about putting all the nuts in the right positions. There are some alternators where the threads are the same in these nuts and the nuts that go here, and some are very different. It depends on the manufacturer of the rectifier, but we'll deal with that later. Actually, just keep your bolts separated, keep them where they go, and you won't have a problem. So I've installed this bolt here, this nut, onto the regulator. I'm going to flip the alternator around, and we're going to be looking at the back. We're going to slide this in the hole, just like that. We're going to flip it over. We're going to hold that post in. I'm just setting that post on something. Keeps it from sliding out of the back. And last but not least, you install the nut. And of course, you're going to tighten that down. Good and tight. Nice and tight. Then we're going to shove this post through this square hole down here from the rear. You can see the insulator's already in there. We're going to go ahead and slide this down in here. Flip this over. I'm going to use that little Carmex container with the weight of it to hold that stud into position. Then, of course, once it's into position, we're going to drop our little insulator down in there. And we're going to drop our Z-shaped metal strap into there. You can put it this way, or you can flip it around and put it this way. Either way works. Personal preference, I guess. I usually do them like this. I put the slot towards the top. Then you're going to install the nut, and I'm just going to do it loosely here. I'm going to have to, I'll start this over. I need both hands. As I was saying, don't over tighten these nuts. Be careful not to break them off. If they don't screw all the way down by finger, then something's wrong. Just don't break them off. We'll go from here to reinstalling the rear half of the alternator. What you're going to do, let's just act like the stator's connected and everything. Once this is done, you're going to slide the rear of the case back onto the rear of the alternator carefully. You're going to make sure to position this tab where it was. I mean, some of them are clocked to the left or the right or whatever. You're going to put it where it was in the same position in relationship to the front of the housing as it was when you removed it. You're going to put the 3 bolts back into these holes that you removed to take the rear of the alternator off. You're going to make sure the thing's squeezed together. You're going to tighten these down with a nut driver by hand. Just tighten them down with a nut driver till your alternator pulls itself together. It's nice and tight and solid. And then you're going to give them maybe a 1/4 of a turn. There is a torque spec. You can look online and see what the torque spec is for a, what is it, a 3/8 16, or not a 3/8 16. It's a 1/4 inch 20 thread per inch thread size. There is a torque spec for that. I'll see if I can find that. But basically, you're going to tighten these down with a nut driver, hand tight, and use a small ratchet and give them about a 1/4 turn, a little less. You want to tighten these evenly. It's important that they tighten evenly. Once you've done that, once they're tightened evenly, you're going to spin the front of your alternator. You know, you're going to lay the whole alternator on its side. You're going to spin it and make sure you don't hear any rubbing or grinding or anything weird like that where you did anything weird. Once it's together, your alternator is together, you're going to go ahead and mount it back on your vehicle. You're going to connect, of course, the charge wire, the ground wire, and put your belt on and all that other stuff. Make sure all your brackets are there. And the pin that you put to hold your brushes in place, you'll see protruding from the rear. Your alternator will not charge with that in place. Once everything is hooked up and it's ready to go, you simply pull the pin. That will let the brushes pop forward. I'll show you. They popped forward again, and they will be touching on the slip ring on the rotor. You'll see the rotor and all that stuff when you pull it off. It'll be very, very simple. This is a simple job to replace these parts. Simple hand tools. No real technical skill, I guess, required. And I'll go over some of these parts with you next, the new parts. Okay, we're going to discuss some new parts. The insulators that I showed you inside, when you get a parts kit from us, it's going to come with some spares. Sometimes these get a little messed up, the ends get cracked or whatever. These are just replacements. Use them if needed. You can replace them all. You can replace one of them. You know, just replace a bad one if you need it, or replace none of them, whatever you need. If they're in good shape, you can reuse them. This is what a brush looks like. This clip clips onto the brush holder assembly. It's that black piece of plastic. Just review the video, you'll see where they connect. And here's the brush itself. This is a brush arm. You don't really need these in the kit unless they're destroyed. They don't wear out. But simply, the brush will slide right into this square groove, and you just push it real hard. Now it's connected. There you go. Here's the pin I'm talking about using it to hold the brushes back, the brush and brush arm back. You can use anything. Straight, stiff, solid piece of metal, like I said, a carburetor cleaner straw, anything like that. We'll go ahead and stop there. If you have any questions, you can ask them on this video. You can text 734-755-9532, and I'll give you a hand with that. You might want to check out our site, wolverinetechnologiesllc.com. We make alternators. We build them special with custom shafts and lots of other things, higher output, for all military vehicles. 24 volt. Ours put out 80 to 85 amps. The prices start at $239 and go up from there. You can have them with a powder baked green finish, which is really cool. You'll notice it's inside and out. That keeps corrosion away. This case, this powder baking, is chipped up quite a bit because this is our trainer case. We teach people how to work on these, and we use this one, and you can see it gets beat around a lot. We also make add-on kits, a 12 volt kit that will go on top or in addition to our 24 volt replacement alternator. That will give you, you'll have the 24 volts for your vehicle plus the 12 volt additional system, so you can run winches, lights, radios. Fire departments love the 12 volt add-on kits. Let me know in the comments or email me, Tim at wolverinetechnologiesllc.com, if you need any help, any pointers, installation issues, what have you. I just made this video for a customer who has an alternator and he had an issue. Not sure if it's my alternator, but the rear case half is the same, so this will help him out. Thanks a lot.